All right, fellow Americans, remember the European Union now, it thinks that it actually has like control over our own tax codes. Like there are global rules and you can't transgress them. You can't reform your tax code. It'll make the US too competitive. Now, first let's look at the hypocrisy here. The European Union here is saying the US can't enact every aspect of this tax reform. For reasons, it prevents multinationals from offshoring enormous sums of money at a whim. It prevents U.S. firms from paying a tax haven tax rate while licensing everything over here and then forcing franchisees in the United States to basically suck them off. So it helps U.S. businesses, it helps the U.S. people, as we've seen with AT&T among other companies. They're feeling the love right now. But trust me, this is going to be like the most popular tax reform passage since the Reagan administration. Trump is going to rise significantly in approval. It's the wallet. It's the money, stupid. It has all this other stuff has become secondary because of this. There's a reason that they're about to have a big ass celebration at the White House over this. Just going to be the way that it is. Trump, the hashtag resist people are going to have a pretty fucking sad Christmas, I think. When they see the next round of polling, I think that they'll be surprised. But the European Union heads, they never aim this sort of criticism at protectionist nations in the third world. It's just like with human rights abuses. People always call out like the U.S. government, and I do too. When the U.S. government mollycoddles Saudi Arabia, which is one of the world's greatest human rights abusers, while talking about how evil the Iranians are, and that's hypocritical, in all honesty, they call that out, but they're not willing to call out the European Union states for thinking they're so holier than thou, and their third world tin horn allies and trading partners. No, we'll leave them alone, but we need to talk down to that evil orange bully Trump. And people here who think that they're anti-establishment, again, like hashtag resist people, they don't even realize the real world establishment has become a globalized establishment. It's not even just the U.S. government. It's just like when we criticize Congress or the president or something. That's all well and good, and that's definitely fair. But most of the abuse at this point comes from bureaus. It comes from the heads of bureaus and from their heavily armed, militarized agents and their surveillance state. They're the ones that handle that apparatus. Congress barely knows, I think, at this point what even goes on. Everything's so compartmentalized and so complicated and so legalistic and classified and requires, 10 signatures to see a single, line that's been unredacted. At this point, even Congress, I think, totally lost control of things. So when this tax reform went through, at first I was like, well, I'm optimistic. It looks good, certainly. Even Trump's opponents, their summation of what it will do, they're like, well, it gives bigger savings to the rich. But if you look at the proportion, it's actually heavily slanted towards the lower rungs. Those are the ones getting the most tax relief. Somebody who's making $1 million a year, they save $10,000. Yeah, that's a lot of money, but at the same time, relative to the amount that they actually pay, it's fairly small. Meanwhile, somebody who makes $25K a year, they're saving $1,000. They're basically not paying anything. It's great for the lower and working and lower middle class. They're getting the bulk of the relief. The middle and upper middle class are getting a fairly good chunk, like I'm getting some. Not as much as if I made half of what I'm making, but it's substantial. People who are rich, they're barely getting anything, just as an absolute number. People don't understand ratios to absolute numbers. It's actually rather sad that mathematics has declined so significantly in this country. People just gobble up the propaganda swill. But who died and made the European Union king over our fiscal policy? If you don't like the fact, if you think that we're going to become too competitive for you, if you want to whine, say, well, you big bad U.S. will steal our jobs, basically, why don't you become more competitive too? Why don't you deregulate and cut taxes? That's a great idea. I think there was a time, I think it was, during the days of the Homestead Act, I believe, if I remember correctly. Back during the 1800s, there was a time when people fled Europe for the United States specifically because they're like, the rent is too damn high. We can't get ahead here. There's no opportunity. Everything's already dense and filled up. What the fuck am I supposed to do? I'm living on my same family farm, and as the population increases, it keeps getting divided more and more, but there's no opportunity for upward mobility. I can't, become a merchant or anything. It took 5 generations for some halfway skilled European to build up enough money so that their great-great-great-grandchild, if everything went perfectly, could go maybe get a halfway decent education and rise up to the middle class. That's why people left Europe in the first place. That's what Europe is like now again today. For a while it wasn't. When there was a big bad USSR to fight, people sort of ignored these things and worked harder, and governments had a reason to provide some mobility so people wouldn't be demoralized, and we could set ourselves apart from those rust bucket commies over there that have constant misery and breadlines. Once they collapsed, it seemed that we lost our collective will to even bother existing as a Western civilization. We don't even fucking care anymore. Screw mobility, globalism is inevitable, we're just slaves, oh well, get over it, at least I've got a nicer gilded cage than my neighbor. Well, that's not exactly the world I want to live in. It folds over into the internet. Look, the EU says, well, mean, abusive trolls from the United States online, we gotta muzzle them. Meanwhile, you don't have any problem with blasphemy laws in the world, the fact that women are treated as property in half the fucking countries in the world, tin horn dictators slaughtering their own people, genocide and ethnocide. Those aren't problems. Don't talk about those. Don't talk about some latent communist movement killing 10,000 people in Burma. Don't talk about xenophobic attacks in India or Pakistan. Those aren't problems to the bigwigs at the EU who are so high and mighty, so moral, so absolutely virtuous because, they're Europeans, so that somehow makes them special. By the way, they only have a problem with it if it's over here. And it's much more, it's people with ideological beliefs, or they say something that's offensive, so we need to throw them in the gulag, says Angela Merkel, but just ignore all of our trading partners abusing collectively tens of millions of people. That's okay. Perfectly fine. We're not going to say a word about it. Absolute hypocrisy. By the way, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I mean, I like my European fans too. I have no problem with the European people, and I have no problem with the European nations. The national governments over there typically are better. I'm talking mainly about the EU and the handful of people like a Merkel or what's his name, a Macron, or whoever the hell runs France at this point. These are your abusers. They're abusing you, and now these same people are sad because our tax reform bill will keep them from abusing us. There's a reason, I think we all understand why there was a Brexit. There's a reason why increasing numbers of Eastern Europeans want to leave the EU now too. There's an increasing tide against the EU because post-national governance is abusive. It's become stupid and inefficient. It's strangulating your economy. We're saying we're no longer going to play by those rules and strangulate our economy. Good for us. Yeah, we're standing up to the bully. By the way, we're the military superpower. We've got the bigger military. We've got the bigger economy. To hell with the EU's rules. Who fucking cares? We'll work closer with China. You only have a problem with human rights abuses if it's someone saying something offensive in the Western world. You don't care about, suicide nets on Chinese factories. I haven't heard the EU say a jack shit about that. Well, we might as well just work with China then, I guess. I mean, at least you'll tolerate one side of our trade deal. You don't have a problem with their protectionism. You don't have a problem with central planning in parts of the Eastern world. You don't have any problem with it, unless one of those countries is too friendly with Trump, I guess. He's got you all out of sorts. I don't understand it. How can one man be so powerful that he gets all of the European Union up in arms by passing tax reform of all things? By the way, this isn't going to make the EU look more popular. Look, Europeans, you need to heed this message here. The European Union is now saying that it's bad for Americans on the other side of the Atlantic to have more of their own money. That it's bad for them to make more money. Don't you think they have the same mentality when it comes to you? They're globalists. They want to rule the world. Angela Merkel wants to be the Führer of the entire world. They're the real imperialists. They're not even like the nationalists. The nationalists are like, oh, we want to reign over our traditional cultural core or something, and then maybe invade one of our neighbors. The globalists are like, no, there can be individual nations. They're not going to have any real power. They're going to be vestigial. They'll just be figureheads. And it'll take them 20 years to leave our union, and we'll probably march in and slaughter everyone before they do that anyway. I'm surprised that they haven't suggested invading the UK at this point almost. I'm almost surprised. It's obvious that they're going to rake them over the coals and abuse them as much as possible. Poor Nigel Farage. He gets his Brexit, and then because Theresa May is so weak, he comes out and says, well, yeah, I see that we have successfully humiliated ourselves. Now we can go and get the next round of humiliation done with. It's pretty sad. You should just say to hell with you, start violating their rules that a women refuse to acknowledge their legal decisions. Man, we're not part of the EU anymore. Fuck off. We're not under any contracts with you. Screw you. We're not paying you a cent. The rest of the world should pressure the EU. What the world should do Instead of getting together under an involuntary collective, instead of globalism, there should be globalization of cooperation instead, and it should be voluntary. The countries should get together and prevent multinational groups from springing up. All countries should prevent multinational, like tax haven bullshit, so that everyone can compete fairly, hopefully with a maximum of actual competition. Right now, of course, competition appears to be outlawed in the European Union. I wonder why you have fiscal problems. I wonder why so many people over there are like, yeah, you know, the socialist system is fine, but I mean, you can't get ahead. You know, they still go to the United States or some other country. People move to fucking China to open a business. That's how bad it is in some of these countries, so strangulated. You know, you talk to people in Europe, a lot of them aren't a happy bunch. You know, some things are definitely really great about Europe, you know. Some of the healthcare systems there are fine, and certainly you got some good cuisine, but then you get all these cultural problems. It's like, why the hell, if the EU can't manage its conglomerate of nations, why should we listen to it? It's not enlightened. It's not unabusive. It's not moral or virtuous. It's just a collective of politicians, stuffed shirt bureaucrats that'll grow more corrupt over time because they're like ticks. They're like leeches or fleas. That's exactly, we have the same problem with our own bureaucracy, and we're just one nation. We're not even a conglomerate. So, yeah, it's a problem when the EU is saying, ooh, our tax reform is against the law. Who fucking cares about your laws? We're not Europe. We're the United States. We're removed from you by the Atlantic Ocean. We're not on the same continent. Leave us alone. If you want to have non-compete between your nations and strangle yourselves, okay. Obviously, you know, Americans are getting a little tired of that. The people of the Rust Belt largely are the ones that decided that they wanted this kind of reform exactly. Good. Yeah, saved by Michigan. Yeah, God help us all, I suppose. That's about all. Peace out.